This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. We have another fun interview for you. This time, a young comic that I've not had the pleasure of working with, but I've heard great things about, and I have seen some of his comedy sets. A very funny guy. He's out of Forest Hills, New York. Forest Hills was the home of Jerry Seinfeld, Ray Ramano, even Simon and Garfunkel. He's been doing comedy for a number of years, but let's learn more about him from him. Ladies and gentlemen, infamous, almost famous, very funny comic Rick Allen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Rick, the crowd goes nuts. It's great to have you on the podcast. I know you still live and work out of Forest Hills, New York. How's your afternoon going?
It's going terrific. We have Indian summer going on here in New York. Actually, I'm sorry, it's Guardian summer. Yeah, I think that's what they call it.
Definitely. Now, you've been doing comedy, what, about 7-8 years?
I've been doing comedy since it's a little hard to quantify. I've been doing comedy since the early 90s, but I had a few hiatuses. And if you probably put it all together, I'm somewhere between a 12 and 15-year comic.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I knew you had some years of experience. I've seen your set, so I know you kind of know what you're doing. What I wanted to bring to the audience is that you're a newer comic in the sense that the comics I normally interview are guys I worked with back in the 80s and 90s. And so you're kind of the fresh crop of comic entertainment coming out of the East Coast. I know it's been a challenge. COVID really hit the industry hard. Did you get a chance to work at all during that?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I was out of the business from 2013 until 2020. And it was Father's Day 2020 that I had made up my mind that I was going to go back into comedy, which is ridiculously bad timing. But
I'd say so.
Yeah, it was the timing of my life. I mean, I had lost both my parents a couple years earlier, and I was just in the right frame of mind that I wanted to go forward and put my best foot forward in comedy in 2020. I actually started going around. I started going around to like firehouses and doing comedy. There was no comedy. There was Zoom shows. So I was like knocking on firehouses and doing like first responder comedy. And that's how I got the ball rolling.
Well, that's kind of cool, though, to be honest. And I think it's really entrepreneurial of you to go after locations like firehouses and entertain people that are still working despite COVID and getting a chance. We've often shared with the podcast audience that when you're a stand-up comic, getting in front of a crowd is the most important thing. It doesn't really matter how many or where. I mean, a lot of famous comics, would drop into a laundromat and do 10 minutes. It's interesting. Can you kind of share, even though you've had kind of an off and on career, how did you kind of start off? What made you decide to get into stand-up comedy?
I don't know. I mean, like a lot of people, I was a character growing up, and I was always the guy in the crowd with the good idea. Hey, let's do this. I was always the creative guy. When I was 4 years old, I used to make up songs in my head, like completely made up songs and like walk around singing them. And so I always had the creative thing going on inside of me. But as far as the comedy goes, like I had a friend in my neighborhood who's passed away. His name was Michael Mandel, was a feature act, and he worked a lot. And he took me under his wing, and he would get me 5 minutes on all these book shows, and he would tell me that I have a lot of potential. And so I just kept going from there. So that's pretty much how it happened for me.
Well, that's really great, though, to get that kind of opportunity to have a mentor in comedy. And to be honest, most comedians working didn't have that. They kind of had to find their own way and go through the crucible of open mics and lone wolf kind of entertainment, if that makes sense. Do you remember your first joke or bit that you wrote?
Oh, yeah, I had a lot of hacky jokes. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, like the rest
it
of
works.
Let me think. Can I curse?
Oh, sure.
Okay. So one of my first jokes was a ring announcer, my impersonation of ring announcer Michael Buffer in a house of prostitution. Here we go. Ready? Oh, let's fuck. That was one of my first. pretty bad. Yeah, pretty bad, but kind of funny. Yeah.
No, but the thing is, when you're new and just getting your legs on stage, as they say, or finding your comedy voice, you have to go to things that and that are kind of exaggerated to get that audience attention. Have you found it easy for you to write comedy, or is it one of the challenges as a performer to write material?
Well, I think it's in my opinion, like the brain is like a muscle. It's like working out. If you start writing and you write every day, your brain will warm up and the good stuff will start flowing right out of you. It's just a matter of, not getting stuck and just blocking aside some time every day and writing. And you got to be motivated. You got to really want to write. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents about writing.
No, but that's a good point, because I've talked to some entertainers that it's natural. They may have, been a writer before they became a comic, and so it comes easy to them. And there's other people that have been very successful that really are struggle, and it's a challenge to get themselves you had to force themselves to sit down and write. But I think that one of the general threads ties into what you said, and that the gift that a comic has is that when you're watching the world go by, you can see the funny in life a little bit more often and consistently than everybody else. I've heard some of your material. It's all very relatable. You do have kind of that New York attitude.
Yes.
I don't know how that's really explained. It's so funny because we say, oh, it's a New York attitude. How would you define that?
How would I define the New York shtick? I don't know. It's just I don't think you can really. It's something you can't quantify. It's like you just know it when you see it. I went to London recently, and they like the New York kind of thing. So it went favorably for me over there. But yeah, it's just something that's easily identifiable, and there's a little bit of attitude behind being a New York guy, and I definitely, I'm a New York guy, so I don't have to fake it. It just kind of comes out there.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. A lot of it is attitude. Sometimes it's in the accent and the voice, but I also think there's a certain honesty to East Coast kind of New York comedy. Right. I don't want to be too judgy, and this is not 100% true, but comics out of LA or the West Coast are a little bit more. They see life through an exaggerated eye and find the funny that way. I think East Coast comics, hey, this is the way it is, and this is why it's funny. Right.
Yeah, I think it's more matter of fact, being a New York comic. Yeah, I do believe that. Yeah,
it is interesting, and I think it's great that they appreciated that over in England, because the Brits have a totally unique sense of humor. I know that some people wouldn't think that humor is international, but it is so true that in Europe, and especially in England, men in dresses make them laugh hysterically. Benny Hill, Benny Hill was their big comedy star, and it was all about sex and dressing as women. They like that kind of harsh hit towards comedy, wouldn't you think?
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely a New York guy's a novelty act, but I do agree, and I love the British sense of humor. And I took a boat ride on the Thames River with my wife. My wife came along on this trip. The guy who did the tour, he was really funny, and I enjoyed him. And I went up to him after the tour, and I told him, I said, I really think you're funny. I said, and I know funny. And I shook his hand, and he followed me on Instagram. But yeah, I definitely concur. I love the British sense of humor. Yes.
Yeah, I grew up with Monty Python and was a big fan of their Fawlty Towers TV show and the movies. And then I had a chance to work with Graham Chapman on my stage back before
Oh,
he passed. And they have such a great honesty in their humor. And also the bizarre, the whole men dressing as women and other, dead parrots talking and stuff. They always something a little crazy, a little different.
Yeah, it's called out. Yeah, they're very out there with their humor. Yeah, that's how I would define it.
Now, but when you were growing up, were there comics that you aspired to, enjoyed? I did a little research on you. I know you're a fan of George Carlin and Don Rickles. Did that give you any sort of foundation for your comedy?
I guess on some level there is some inspiration there when you see someone you really love and they really make you laugh. I don't know. That's a difficult question. I don't know, but I definitely was I am a big George Carlin guy. I became friendly with Dennis Blair, who opened for him for 18 years.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, a very cool guy. You should interview him, perhaps. But in any event, big George Carlin guy. Like Eddie Murphy, I like Chris Rock. A lot of the good guys, and I guess it's just more of an inspirational thing. I don't know if I'm really taking anything from them away, but you're inspired. You see someone who's up there, and they're just really funny, and they're natural, and they're killing, and
so it showed you a light on stand-up comedy as a career, but you didn't per se follow in their style of comedy. For example, George Carlin was kind of antisocial monologist, and then I know that you took some appreciation of Don Rickles, who was a bit of an insult comic. Now, he got away with it because he insulted everybody, and his explanation was it was to bring people together. Of course, that would be challenging in this woke society, wouldn't you think?
Oh, completely. I saw Don Rickles on hosting Saturday Night Live. I want to say it was 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. And he was doing the same thing he always did, and he wasn't getting the same reaction. And it was a little sad to see that the world had passed Don Rickles by, But Don Rickles is a legend, and he'll always be, great in my eyes.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Mr. Rickles as well, and I think that people are just so ridiculously thin-skinned now that they can't laugh at themselves, and they're afraid to laugh at others, even though it's a shared moment. Don Rickles didn't pick on an individual to shine a light on that individual. He picked on everybody to prove the fact that we're all human, we all have fallacies, and that pointing those differences out in his comedic way was his way to try to make everybody feel together. And I think, sadly, the new generation doesn't understand that. They're too I don't know what the right word is.
They're too stuck behind their computer screen.
They don't get the interaction there. With that in mind, would you, I know you've seen comedy from the 80s and 90s, and you kind of been doing more comedy since 2000. Would you compare the comedy scene or the type of comedy from that generation to your generation? Do you see a difference? Does societal changes change your, the way you present comedy?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be cutting edge. But I'll tell you one thing about to what you were talking about with Don Rickles. Like, I was taught, because I had a bunch of teachers, and I was always taught that if you get the audience on your side and you get them with you, then there is a level of you can insult them a little bit, depending, how you do it, but you'll have more leeway to go after someone a little bit once they're on your side. So I do that. I still go after people in the audience a little bit, It's not. I make sure that I'm safe. That I'm not. I want to work. You were a comedy club owner, so you know what I'm talking about. But but you still have a lot more. You still have a lot of leeway if you get them on your side, you get them with you, as long as you don't go way over the line and say something ridiculous.
I think you're sharing a good point that anytime you're going to. You have to get the audience on your side, and that's why when I'm talking to new young comics, I'll say, start off with a little self-deprecation, lower yourself to their level. And then once they see that you're willing to pick on yourself, the audience is a little more open to you picking on them. You know what I mean? Then you're in it together. It helps you engage with them.
Right.
I once worked with Bill Maher, who is a political comic that can be very insulting to an audience, but I fired his ass because he actually took it too far and called the audience stupid and walked off the stage. It was, and he was wrong. I think rule number one, I don't know if you agree, but as a producer, rule number one is you're getting paid to entertain the audience.
I would have fired him too, I guess, if he did something like that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, the point is that you're there for the audience. The audience isn't there for you, kind of thing. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. So when now that you've been doing it over, 5 years, but as you said, spread out over a decade, is there things that now about stand-up comedy as a industry that you wish you knew 10 years ago?
Well, you know what? People told me stuff about I wish I had listened to people like my teachers, the people that taught me early. They told me things and I just didn't listen. And I wish I had simply just listened to the fact that, keep your mouth shut and, just kind of be funny and say thank you and just, be easy to work with and be a funny guy. And, I just found that my, running your mouth doesn't help you very much in the comedy business. And so, that's one of the biggest things. So, and just work hard. I didn't work hard. That was the other thing I didn't do. I did not work hard. I wasn't serious. But I got a little older and, it's never too late, I guess. This Rodney Dangerfield didn't make it till he was, in his 60s?
Yeah, so 50s at least. Yeah. Well, I think that's great advice because I've worked with lots of open micers and opening acts and maybe it was a self-defense mechanism if I wanted to be generous, but they were jerks. They were, it was about them and what they wanted. And I was like, I'd worked with, Leno and Robin Williams and Seinfeld.
Wow.
I could care less if he had he has an attitude like he's somebody, because I know he's not. He may want to be, but comics need a certain amount of humility. I think that's what you're saying. Is
absolutely. Yeah, there's no comedian. I mean, you're just basically on your, how you conduct yourself and how funny you are. So you really got to sharpen those two things. So.
Right. You have to work at your craft. And I think the other thing that a lot of young comics don't understand is that it's a business and that you're, for at least a night, an hour, or for a week, if you have a gig, you're the employee of that producer, of that club owner. And so there has to be a respect, not only for the management, but for the staff. One of my biggest rules back in the day when I owned a chain of comedy clubs was that you better treat my staff well because that's my family. And some comics thought that the comedy club was their sexual playroom, and that didn't go with me. Or that, they took advantage of, drinking for free, or they took advantage of this or that. It's a business. I was running a business and they had to kind of go along with the rules. And I'm saying this out loud because when a potential young comic listens to this podcast, I want them to understand that it's a 2-lane road, that it's also creative, comedy entertainment, but it's also a business. And if you go into it eyes open about the business side and the creative side, you'll go farther. I'm doing all the talking, Rick, but I think you get my point.
Yeah, no. It was told to me that it's show business. The word business is in show business. That was hammered home to me very early on. Yes.
And do you work mostly clubs in New York? Are you getting out of state?
I throughout my career, I've been out of state. I had gotten out of last year. I worked in El Paso. I'll be working in Pennsylvania. I'm definitely more East Coast, obviously, geographically. But I don't know where this is going to take me now because the sky's the limit. I'm working hard and I'm excited.
Now that COVID's over and the fact that you got to play over in England, I mean, that's a great opportunity. A lot of people don't realize, it's kind of so funny because growing up, we always heard, join the Navy and see the world. To be honest,
Right.
if you become a stand-up comic, you could see the world just as easy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And my wife wants to come along too. She's like, when you're going somewhere good, let me know.
Sure. Have some fun with it. Have you had any extra good or extra bad road stories?
I'll stay away from the extra bad ones.
Well, I didn't mean you were bad.
Not that I would really want to share because then I'm throwing someone under the bus. I don't want to share any extra bad stories. But the extra good stories, you do really well, and you come out of there and you're on cloud 37, and then you don't get rebooked. That kind of thing happens. It's a lot of highs and lows, and I don't know if I could really share any good. So maybe I'm not the best guy for this question, but
no, that's okay, Rick. It's all about the experiences that we have as entertainers, and sharing what happens, good or bad, can be educational to somebody else, and also sometimes humorous. But you hold on to those, keep them close to your chest, and when you're a little older, you don't care quite as much, and maybe a little drunk, we'll get the stories out of you.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, maybe I could tell you a couple times I completely forgot my act there, and I had to stall, and that's pretty scary,
Oh,
and
stage fright will do that to you. Sometimes if you're not prepared and all of a sudden you get on stage, I've been on stage thousands of times, and you get up there and you just go blank, and it's like,
right, it happens, yeah.
And then you panic, and then once you're panicked, it's hard to remember.
Right. So I find like these days, sometimes if I don't get the proper sleep and I try to throw in a bunch of new jokes, I'm just not going to remember them. You got to know yourself. And I learned that I have to get a good night's sleep and everything. Otherwise I'm not going to be able to throw too many new jokes in on a set because I'm just not going to remember them correctly.
Right.
Yeah,
and being prepared and like you said, knowing who you are and where you are in your career is so important. Well, Rick, you've shared some good insights about being a stand-up comic. What's coming up for you in 2023? Do you have any gigs or special shows or projects you're working on?
Yes, I'm working on a bunch of things. I had just performed for celebrities, which was really exciting. I did, it was my first time doing that. I did the Victor Green Foundation celebrity golf event, performed for sports celebrities, famous actors. And
that's
that
fun.
went. Yeah, they threw me up there during dinner. It was a little tougher. I talked to Tom Cotter, who does the Joe Namath event, and he told me, he said he puts it in his contract that he can't go up during dinner. So I went up during dinner. So it was a little tough, but I did pretty well. I'm pretty confident they're going to ask me back. So I did that. I just applied to America's Got Talent, hoping that I could get on that. And I have a TV show that I wrote that I already pitched to Chuck Lorre. That we just sent it to Richard Schiff from West Wing, who also produces things. So we're trying to push my show, and I also have a reality show idea. I have another thing that I'm looking to get on the local New York One station here. It's called The Funny Side of New York with Rick Allen. So we're working on that. I'm going to do some interviews. Hopefully we can get that off the ground. And I'm looking to tour and just to be the best I could be. And I only live once, and I'm letting it rip. That's what I'm doing.
Well, I think that's great advice. Let it rip. Well, ladies and gentlemen, keep an eye out for Rick Allen coming to a comedy club near you, or maybe the TV screen. It sounds like you have a lot of irons in the fire, Rick. And when you're a creative person, that's how you make things happen. So congratulations on that. It's my pleasure to have you on the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick, how can people reach out to you if they'd like to hire you?
Okay, so you can reach me directly at funnyrick20@gmail. You can go to my website, rickallencomedy.com. I also have an agent now from Iconic Agency. Her name is Myra Alexandra, excuse me. You could get her through my website too. If you go to the bottom, you'll have her contact information too.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for a good East Coast attitude comic who's had some experience and starting to do some charity work and tour the world, and even has some possibilities for creative work on television, reach out to rickallen.com and you'll have
rickallencomedy.com.
Let's get it right. rickallencomedy.com, and you can learn more about Rick and connect with him. Rick, thanks again for being on the podcast. We'll look forward to seeing you in the years to come. Continued success, sir.
Thank you, and same to you, Scott. Thank you so much.
And ladies and gentlemen, as what's tradition on this podcast, after an interview, I do have some stand-up comedy by our interviewee, Rick Allen, out of Forest Hills, New York. So sit back and enjoy some live recorded comedy by Rick Allen.
All right, so nice to be here in Jersey. I'm from New York, New York City. Thank you very much, New York. Either love them or hate them. I'm not feeling the love over here. They catch on. Yeah, so I'm from New York. I was living in Florida for a while. You guys familiar with Florida? You guys familiar with English? Ask a question. No, I was living in Florida for like 3.5 years. Listen, Florida's a nice place. It really wasn't for me. Like I'm a New York kind of guy, you know. But I tell you, like New York and Florida, two completely different places, two totally different worlds. Like for example, New York has a lot of fender benders. Florida has a lot of sex offenders. You've been to Florida, you probably know that shit. So, they got some dumb expressions in the South. Now, I was down there for like 3.5 years. Man, they got some dumb expressions. Like you ever hear this one? Thank you kindly. Why do we need to put the word kindly after the words thank you? Is there a different kind of thank you that we need to differentiate? I think we should put the word kindly after you say something really nasty. Like, hey, go fuck yourself. Kindly. Pull New York into that shit. Another thing I love about New York, they got so many different types of people. You pick up all these different accents. You know, my favorite is the British accent. You know, you can make like anything sound sophisticated with a British accent. You can make like having to take a dump sound sophisticated with a British accent. Pardon me, I must retire to the bathroom, Paul. Taking a poop, I say. I wonder what the jails are like in England. Because I can't imagine like trying to sound tough in jail with a British accent. I'm going to kick your tail all over this floor. And I'm going to take all your belongings. Oh, I'm scared. And somehow I don't see myself all that frightened at the prospects of being locked up with a guy named Nigel. And so a little about me, I'm actually a recovering addict. I used to do drugs, not anymore. Clean addict, thank you very much. No, I used to be really bad. I used to be really bad. I mean, I was so bad. If there was like a gold medal for doing drugs, I would have stolen it. Melted it down and sold it for drugs. So now I'm doing better. I'm staying clean, you know. And my life is so much better. Then what happens? Ironically, weed is legal in New York. They got all these weed shops popping up all over the city. And here's something I found out. This is true. I saw this online. You can actually take a class to learn the weed business. You go to school for weed. Times are changing. I used to roll a joint before class. Now it's part of the curriculum. So if weed is legal, can you drive on weed? And what's the legal limit? 1 joint, 2 joints? And what's the test to see if you're over the legal limit? Like instead of a breathalyzer, they give you 3 bags of potato chips? If you can't eat them all, you're off the hook. I got a question. What's up with stoners and stairwells? Why do stoners always want to get behind the staircase? I live on the 4th floor in my building. Every time I want to go downstairs, by the time I get to the 3rd floor, I'm already high. By the time I get to the 2nd floor, I need a GPS. By the time I get to the lobby, I'm so high, I got to ask the doorman to tie my shoes. I got loafers on. Well, maybe maybe weed being legal, maybe that's kind of a good diversion from having to deal with this pandemic for the last 2 years. You know, like for me, like one of the things that kind of bothered me the most was like having to wear a mask all the time. I mean, it's annoying. It's uncomfortable. I mean, you wear the mask so much, it becomes like a part of your face. You know, like 6 months ago, when the CDC said we don't have to wear masks anymore, I went out of my house without a mask. It felt like my face went to a nudist colony. Utica, you know, it's a funny name, Utica, you know. It's kind of a funny name, right? Sounds like a body part, you know, like last week I had my Utica removed. Where is your Utica? I don't know, I think it's connected to my Schenectady. Something like that, yeah. You know what happens in Utica stays in Utica? Did you know that? What happens in Utica, do you know why? Because nobody gives a shit. Fucking Utica. If somebody blew up the entire city of Utica, New York, the rest of New York wouldn't find out about it for about fucking 2 weeks. It's Utica.
Well, that's some funny stuff. We really appreciate Rick being on the show and allowing me to interview him and sharing some of his comedy. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you had as much fun as we did doing this. And stay tuned. There's more great comedy coming your way. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.